Imagine the desert of Tunisia in February 1943, the air thick with dust and smoke, when German commanders stared in disbelief. Before their eyes, American Sherman tanks were moving with a precision that seemed almost unnatural. 5 Shermans, separated by ridges and gullies with no clear line of sight, converged on German positions in flawless coordination. No flags were waved, no flares fired, no couriers rushing between them. Yet they advanced like a single body, each tank guarding the blind spots of the others, as if they shared one mind. Inside their Panzer V's, German officers struggled with static-filled radios. Orders came faint, broken, often drowned in the roar of their own engines. Their few G5 radios, considered advanced just a few years earlier, used 10-watt transmitters that barely reached a kilometer or two under perfect conditions. Most of their tanks had only receivers, able to hear but never to answer. A platoon leader could give commands, but if his tank was destroyed, easily spotted by its multiple antennas, the rest of the platoon became helpless, forced to guess his intentions. The Americans, however, carried technology that the Germans had never seen. Every Sherman tank had a frequency modulation radio, crystal-controlled for stability, with 25 watts of power. These sets cut through noise like a knife, carrying voices clearly across the chaos of battle. The invisible waves binding tank crews together gave them an edge no armor thickness or gun caliber could match. This transformation had begun long before. On July 22, 1941, the U.S. standardized the SCR 508, 528, and 538 radios for all medium tanks. While German forces pushed deep into Soviet territory relying on outdated AM radios, American engineers at the Galvin Manufacturing Company, later Motorola, perfected FM sets that would change the battlefield. Daniel E. Noble imagined applying FM to tanks, while chief engineer Henryk Magnuski solved the problem of fitting such delicate systems into steel machines. Their work, weighing 181 pounds, turned each Sherman into part of a battlefield-wide network. The BC-604 transmitter produced 25 watts, more than twice the output of the German Few G5. Working between 20.0 and 27.9 MHz, it had 10 preset channels locked in with crystal precision. Commanders could even listen to 2 channels at once thanks to dual BC-603 receivers. But the real breakthrough was FM itself. Edwin Armstrong's invention, licensed for the military, removed the static that plagued AM sets. German radios picked up every spark plug, every electric motor, every artillery blast as noise. American radios kept voices sharp and strong, even in the middle of bombardments. On November 8, 1942, during Operation Torch, American tanks rolled ashore in North Africa, equipped with these radios. The Afrika Korps, battle-hardened and skilled, faced a hidden disadvantage. In their standard 5-tank platoons, only 1 or 2 had full transceivers. The rest had only receivers, unable to respond. Their system depended on hierarchy. The leader spoke and others obeyed silently. When a command tank was destroyed, coordination collapsed instantly. The difference became undeniable at Kasserine Pass in February 1943. Although the Germans scored a tactical victory, they were shaken by what they witnessed. Scattered elements of the U.S. 1st Armored Division, spread over 50 miles, kept perfect coordination. Crews who had never trained together exchanged warnings, shared positions, and even called artillery support, all through FM radios. German intelligence noted how American transmissions carried with crystal clarity at ranges where German sets produced nothing but static. The Few G5, operating in the 27.0 to 33.3 MHz range, simply could not compete. Its 10-watt power struggled to cover 2 or 3 kilometers under ideal conditions, and far less when moving. Every spark from the engine, every track grinding against the earth, became interference. By September 1943, the Americans advanced into Italy, where mountains and valleys should have blocked radio signals. But the FM sets proved even more effective. While German radios failed completely in rough terrain, American tanks coordinated attacks across ridges and valleys, moving as if terrain did not exist. Reports described Shermans linking up across distances where German radios offered silence. On June 6, 1944, Shermans landed in Normandy, their SCR-508 radios linking them directly with naval gunfire offshore. German tanks had no way to match such coordination. Yet in the dense hedgerows, American units faced a new challenge. Their tank radios operated between 20.0 and 27.9 MHz, while infantry radios used 40.0 to 48.0 MHz. This gap meant that soldiers and tanks could not talk to each other. German infantry with Panzerfausts crept close, unseen, while nearby U.S. infantry had no way to warn the tanks. The solution was simple, but brilliant. American crews mounted field telephones in boxes welded to their hulls, connected straight into their intercoms. By July's Operation Cobra, this fix revolutionized tank infantry teamwork. Major General Edward H. Brooks commanded over 200 Shermans, all linked by radio. German defenders from Panzer Lehr Division faced an opponent that seemed to know everything instantly. A threat spotted miles away brought immediate artillery. Tanks shifted and struck as one. The irony was sharp. Germany had once led the way in tank radios. Heinz Guderian, the father of Blitzkrieg, had insisted on radios in tanks since the 1920s. His 1937 book declared communication the lifeblood of armored warfare. Yet by 1943, German industry could not provide the radios his own doctrine demanded. In that year, Germany built about 5,700 medium tanks, but fewer than 2,000 full transceivers. Many went to command tanks or assault guns, leaving countless crews in silence. Even the Soviet Union struggled more. Their T-34s, produced in the tens of thousands, often rolled into battle without radios at all. Orders were given with flags or hand signals. In 1941, this weakness led to disaster against German armor. Only with American Lend-Lease equipment did things improve slightly, with command tanks outfitted with SCR-508 sets. But by war's end, only a quarter of Soviet tanks carried radios. America's accomplishment stood apart. Motorola's Chicago plant, once making car radios, retooled completely for the war. Building SCR-508 sets required precision parts and new techniques. Each unit contained nearly 2,800 components. Crystals had to hold stable frequencies despite heat, cold, and vibration. By 1942, 3,800 sets had been built. In 1943, 11,400 more. By 1944, production reached 24,000. In total, over 50,000 units ensured every Sherman carried a radio. The advantages went beyond clarity. Preset channels held steady under combat, unlike German variable tuning that drifted constantly. Dual receivers let commanders hear both platoon and company channels at once. The BC-606 intercom let every crewman speak. Throat microphones and headsets kept voices clear despite the deafening roar. By contrast, many German tanks lacked intercoms, leaving crews shouting or tapping one another. American radios adjusted automatically between 12 and 24 volts, powered by dynamotors that filtered interference. German sets tied directly into electrical systems picked up every spark. This edge changed American doctrine. Flexible combat commands, temporary groups of mixed units, relied on reliable radios to work. German forces, bound by poor communication, stuck to rigid formations. At Aracourt in September 1944, the U.S. 4th Armored Division faced German brigades with technically superior Panthers. Yet the Americans' coordination proved decisive. Shermans reported enemy movements instantly. Tank destroyers fired at targets spotted miles away. Artillery, called in by radio from Sherman observers, rained down in minutes. In 3 weeks, the division destroyed 281 German armored vehicles while losing only 41 Shermans, a 7-to-1 ratio. German intelligence could not understand the secret behind such coordination. Reports described American discipline, but assumed it came from training, not technology. They believed Shermans would lose direction when commanders were knocked out, never realizing that every single Sherman had the power to lead. German units kept aiming at supposed command tanks, not knowing that all American tanks could transmit. By March 1945, the difference was undeniable. Remagen, when the 9th Armored Division reached the Ludendorff Bridge and found it intact. Radio calls carried the news within minutes. Higher command was alerted instantly. Within the hour, entire divisions shifted their movements to seize the opportunity. German forces, still relying on telephone lines destroyed by Allied aircraft, could not react in time. What could have been a contained breakthrough became a massive advance. In April 1945, the Ruhr Pocket showed the full power of American communication. Armored columns from the 1st and 9th Armies executed a double envelopment through radio coordination alone. More than 300,000 German troops were trapped inside. Fighter bombers, guided by forward air controllers using tank radios, destroyed communication nodes, leaving the Germans cut off from headquarters and from each other. In his final messages before silence, Field Marshal Walter Model admitted the truth. No contact with adjacent units. No link to higher command. Coordination impossible. For American crews, radios were more than tools, they were lifelines. Even when separated, they felt connected. They could call for help, report threats, or request artillery in seconds. German crews, by contrast, felt crushing isolation. Many fought alone, blind to what was happening even a mile away. Otto Carius, one of Germany's most famous tank commanders, later described in his memoir how often crews were left in silence, forced to fight individual battles within a larger war. The strategic impact of communication stretched far beyond tank duels. General Patton's Third Army, racing across France in 1944, depended entirely on radio networks to control units spread across hundreds of miles. American advances moved with a speed Germany could not match, partly because radios allowed orders to flow instantly. German commanders underestimated this, assuming coordination came only from training, never guessing that technology itself was the key. Heinz Guderian, now Inspector General of Armored Troops, understood the issue but admitted defeat. In a December 1944 report, he acknowledged that American coordination erased the edge of German tank quality. Armor and firepower mattered less when the enemy moved as one. After Germany's surrender, Allied technical experts studied captured equipment. Their findings confirmed what soldiers already knew. German tanks often had superior armor or stronger guns, but their radios were outdated. U.S. intelligence labeled them 5 years behind in design. The lack of FM, the limited number of sets, and poor electrical shielding made them fatally flawed. Soviet evaluators agreed. Given access to German radios, they chose instead to copy American designs for post-war tanks. Production statistics revealed the scale of America's achievement. The United States produced more than 50,000 SCR 508 radios, enough for every Sherman built. Each had 25 watts of power, crystal stability within 0.01%, and ranges of 7 miles moving or up to 15 stationary. German production told another story. Only about 6,000 FUG-5 transceivers were built for over 12,000 medium and heavy tanks. That meant barely 20% had full radios. Their 10-watt sets drifted by 1% and reached less than a mile on the move. The difference in artillery support was striking. American fire missions took 3 to 5 minutes from call to impact. German requests often needed 15 to 30 minutes. In practice, that delay meant survival or destruction. American tanks achieved coordination nearly every time. German units managed it only a fraction of the time. This shaped the doctrine of modern armored warfare. The SCR 508's legacy carried into the Cold War. Digital systems replaced analog, but the principle stayed. Every tank must be able to communicate. When West Germany rebuilt its army in the 1950s, it made sure every Leopard tank carried advanced radios. A training manual admitted, "The defeat of superior German tanks by inferior American ones with better radios proves that information dominance outweighs platform superiority." Decades later, the same lesson repeated. In 1991, coalition forces with superior communications destroyed Iraqi units fielding technically strong Soviet tanks, but with weak radios. In 2003, American forces again showed that networked warfare triumphs over isolated platforms. The story of the Sherman's radios was a victory not in steel, but in the electromagnetic spectrum. German tankers discovered too late that each Sherman was more than a machine. It was a node in a larger system. The SCR 508 transformed an average tank into part of a weapon greater than the sum of its parts. This invisible advantage shaped every battlefield. Shermans carried not just guns and armor, but the 181 pounds of radio gear that linked them together. German tanks fought alone, and even their most powerful weapons could not break the unity that radios created. At Kasserine, at Ericourt, across the hedgerows of Normandy and into Germany's heartland, American tanks moved in ways German officers believed impossible without direct sight. They never built a countermeasure because they never fully understood the gap. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel reportedly summed it up at surrender. "We knew how to build better tanks, but you knew how to make them work together." By 1945, America had not only built 49,000 Shermans, but 49,000 linked machines, each one a part of the world's first armored network. Historians would later call this network-centric warfare, but its roots began in 1942, when the first Sherman with an SCR 508 entered combat. From that moment, the rules of war changed. The lesson was absolute. The side with better communication would always defeat the side with better weapons. Networks would triumph over platforms. The connected would overcome the isolated. For German crews, this truth came too late. They saw American tanks move with uncanny coordination, but never grasped the foundation. By the time they realized that every Sherman carried a full radio, the war was already lost. Their failure to adapt became one of the greatest intelligence mistakes of the conflict. In the end, invisible radio waves proved deadlier than even the feared 88mm guns. What mattered most was the ability to coordinate, to call for fire, to act as one. Sherman's, average in armor and firepower, became lethal as a united force. The message was clear. In modern war, connection means survival and isolation means defeat. The German army had once been the pioneer of radio in armored warfare. Heinz Guderian, the father of Blitzkrieg, had demanded that every tank carry a setback in the 1920s. His 1937 book highlighted communication as the very heart of armored tactics. Early German victories had proven him right. But by 1943, the very nation that invented radio-driven blitz attacks was running short of its own creation. German industry, crippled by Allied bombing and resource shortages, could not produce radios in the numbers needed. Statistics revealed the crisis clearly. In 1943, Germany produced nearly 5,700 medium tanks. Yet fewer than 2,000 FUG transceivers were built. Many of those were given to command tanks and assault guns. The result was that most frontline tank crews went into battle with nothing more than receivers, or sometimes with no radio at all. Entire platoons relied on visual signals, hand gestures, or pre-arranged plans. Destroy the leader, and the rest became blind. The Soviets faced an even greater struggle. The T-34, one of the most produced tanks of the war, often rolled into battle without any radio equipment. Soviet doctrine relied on flag signals and detailed pre-battle instructions. In 1941, this was catastrophic. German panzer units, equipped with radios, cut through Soviet lines as their opponents tried to wave colored flags in clouds of smoke and dust. By 1943, some relief came through Lend-Lease shipments. American radios, including SCR 508 sets, were fitted into Soviet command tanks. But even at the war's end, only about a quarter of Soviet tanks carried radios. The rest still fought in silence. The contrast made America's achievement even more striking. In Chicago, Motorola's factory had once made car radios. With the war, it shifted entirely to military production. Building an SCR 508 required solving problems no civilian radio had ever faced. Each set contained 2,548 carefully built components. The BC 604 transmitter alone held 474 capacitors and 385 resistors. Crystals had to stay stable across extreme heat, freezing cold, and the violent shaking of tank combat. Production numbers told the story of industrial might. In 1942, 3,800 sets rolled off the lines. In 1943, 11,400 more. In 1944, a staggering 24,000 units. By the end of the war, more than 50,000 sets had been built, enough to equip every Sherman tank ever produced. This meant that not a single Sherman rolled into battle without a radio. No other nation came close to such coverage. Beyond numbers, the design itself gave advantages that shaped tactics. Crystal control kept channels stable even in combat, unlike German sets that drifted constantly. Dual receivers let commanders monitor both platoon and company nets at the same time. Orders flowed down instantly while updates moved back up without delay. The BC-606 intercom tied entire crews together. Throat microphones let men speak clearly over the deafening roar of engines and guns. Noise-canceling headsets ensured every word was heard. By contrast, many German tanks had no intercom at all. Crews yelled over the noise, tapped one another, or used hand signals in cramped interiors. Power management gave the Americans yet another edge. The SCR-508 could run on 12 or 24 volts, adjusting automatically. Its dynamotor smoothed out interference, keeping messages clean. German radios, wired directly to their vehicles' electrical systems, picked up every spark plug and motor as static. This level of communication created a new way of fighting. American commanders built flexible combat commands, mixing units together for specific missions. Radios allowed them to coordinate without rigid organization. German commanders, limited by poor communication, stuck to traditional structures. The results showed on the battlefield. At Ericourt in September 1944, the U.S. 4th Armored Division faced multiple German panzer brigades equipped with powerful Panther tanks. On paper, the Germans had every advantage: thicker armor, stronger guns, better range. But communication flipped the balance. Shermans passed target information instantly. Tank destroyers struck at enemies they could not even see. Artillery observers inside Shermans called in bombardments within minutes. In just 3 weeks, the Americans destroyed 281 German armored vehicles, while losing only 41 Shermans. A 7-to-1 kill ratio, achieved not by superior machines, but by superior coordination. German intelligence never fully grasped this. Captured reports spoke of American radio discipline, attributing it to training and rigid procedures. They never realized that technology itself was giving Americans an invisible edge. German tactics remained focused on hunting down supposed command tanks, unaware that every Sherman could coordinate. Ambushes were planned under the belief that separating American tanks would break their cohesion. Instead, the Americans stayed linked by radio, moving as one no matter how scattered they became. By 1945, the contrast was absolute. When American forces reached the Rhine, communication supremacy was at its peak. The capture of the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen proved how fast radios could change a campaign. Within minutes of the discovery, reports reached headquarters. Within an hour, divisions shifted their plans. German defenders, relying on landlines constantly cut by Allied bombers, could not react. Their counterattacks arrived piecemeal, uncoordinated, and were destroyed one after another. In April 1945, the encirclement of the Ruhr Pocket demonstrated the culmination of this power. The 1st and 9th Armies coordinated a massive double envelopment entirely by radio. Inside the pocket, more than 325,000 German troops were trapped. Allied fighter bombers, guided by forward air controllers linked to tank radios, destroyed communication centers. German units reported collapse. No contact with higher command, no communication with neighboring divisions. The Wehrmacht, once master of blitzkrieg, now stumbled in silence. The psychological impact was enormous. American tank crews felt secure, knowing they were never truly alone. Even cut off, they remained connected by invisible threads of sound. German crews, by contrast, felt the weight of isolation. They often fought blind, unaware of what was happening around them. Otto Carius later recalled the frustration of trying to lead without reliable communication, fighting as small fragments of a larger battle. The broader lesson became undeniable. Patton's rapid drive across France in 1944, sometimes covering more than 60 miles in a single day, depended entirely on radio networks. Orders moved instantly, adjustments were made on the fly, and entire armored columns wheeled left or right with flawless precision. German commanders watching could not comprehend how American units moved so smoothly without visual contact. The truth was that their own forces, still relying on outdated systems, simply could not match the speed of information. Post-war analysis confirmed what soldiers had already witnessed. U.S. reports declared German tank communications at least 5 years behind. Without FM, with few transceivers and plagued by static, their system failed at the very thing blitzkrieg required most: coordination. The Soviets came to the same conclusion. When given the choice of studying German or American radio technology, they copied the American designs. Every post-war Soviet tank carried radios based on U.S. concepts, not German ones. The technical comparisons told the whole story. American SCR 508 radios pushed 25 watts, kept crystals stable to within 0.01%, and reached 7 miles on the move or 15 when still. German Fuji 5 sets used 10 watts, drifted by 1%, and barely reached a mile under movement. In battle, that difference was fatal. The results were plain. American artillery, called by radio-equipped observers, could strike within 3 to 5 minutes. German artillery often needed 15 to 30 minutes if it arrived at all. U.S. tanks fought as a coordinated team nearly all the time. German tanks, even when technically superior, operated in isolation most of the time. This truth shaped warfare for generations. Modern doctrines of network-centric warfare trace their roots back to Sherman tanks with radios in 1942. The simple act of putting FM sets into every vehicle transformed armored war. By the end of the conflict, America had not just produced 49,000 Shermans, but had created 49,000 linked nodes in a single vast network. The irony of history was sharp. Germany had once pioneered tank radios, building blitzkrieg on their strength. Yet by 1945, their own armor fell silent, while their enemies fought as one unified machine. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel admitted it openly at surrender. "We knew how to build better tanks, but you knew how to make them work together." This legacy carried far beyond World War II. In the Gulf War of 1991, coalition forces with seamless communication networks destroyed Iraqi units fielding Soviet-designed tanks with thicker armor but poor radios. Again, in 2003, American units showed that networks overwhelm platforms. The lesson repeated itself. The connected always defeat the isolated. For the German crews of the Second World War, this realization came too late. They watched in confusion as Shermans moved with coordination that seemed impossible. Many believed it was sheer discipline or luck. Few understood that the secret lay in the weight of 181 pounds of radio gear carried inside every tank. By the war's end, German soldiers had learned the lesson in the hardest way possible. The feared 88mm gun could destroy a Sherman, but it could not destroy the unity of hundreds of Shermans acting together, average in armor, average in firepower, but unmatched in communication. The Shermans became unbeatable as a team. The final truth was clear. In modern war, survival belongs to the connected, defeat to the isolated. Across deserts, mountains, forests, and ruined cities, German soldiers discovered this lesson too late. America's true superiority was not forged in steel, but carried invisibly through the air, on waves of sound that turned machines into a single living network.